Good morning, everyone. Welcome along to our weekly webinar. We're going to be starting very, very shortly. We've just opened the doors, so allowing people to come in all the time. It can't have escaped your attention that actually today is Comic Relief, Red Nose Day. And in line with that, we are asking all of our participants and our attendees to consider donating just a little bit to Comic Relief today. There is a link already in the chat box, chat column. So if you've got a few moments and you would like to make a donation, please do go to that link in the chat column and donate to Comic Relief Red Nose Day. That would be super. Thank you very much. We've got people coming in all the time, so just bear with us if you would. It's let me see, it's not quite 12 o'clock yet, I don't think. Oh yes, it is. It's just turned. So we'll give people a little bit longer to come in, because they're coming in now at the 12. I don't know about everyone else, but I find that I sort of skate into these Zoom calls and team calls at the 11th hour, as I just finished the previous one. Seems to be back to back nowadays, doesn't it, for all of us? So we'll just give it a couple of minutes, if we may. So once again, for those coming in, not only, of course, are we celebrating Comic Relief today, hopefully by collecting a little bit of money on that very good behalf, it's also, as you can see in the chat box now, we're inviting you to join Slido. Howard will be taking us through Slido in the not too distant future. But as I say, we'll just give it another minute. I think we'll give it till 2 minutes past, and then we'll make a start. But you could start by getting your slido.com sorted out on your smartphone so that you can participate in a survey that we're going to talk about very, very shortly. And I'm delighted that we've got Keith Waller here today, who's the project director for the Construction Innovation Hub, to talk all about innovation, which of course is an absolute critical part of the construction sector going forward. Just leave it until 2 minutes past, and then we'll make a start, because we've got people coming in all the time. Right, I think we will make a start, ladies and gents, for those of us that are here at midday. So a very good afternoon to each and every one of you. A very happy Comic Relief Day. And for those that have just come in, we are collecting money during the next 60 minutes for Comic Relief. If you feel so inclined, you will see in the chat column that I've put a link for Red Nose Day. If you just click on that link sometime in the next 60 minutes and make a donation, that would be fabulous, and maybe save you the need to do it later on when you're watching the TV. Anyway, I'm Andrew Carpenter. I am Chief Executive of the Structural Timber Association, and also of Constructing Excellence in the Midlands and the Southwest. And I'm joined now in hosting these weekly webinars, by the rest of the Constructing Excellence Network, and also by the CIOB in the Southwest. So it's now 8 organizations coming together to bring you these regular Friday afternoon sessions. As I say, I'm delighted that with me today is Keith Waller. Keith is Project Director for the Construction Innovation Hub, and he's going to be talking about the role of innovation in driving our economic recovery. But before that, I'm going to hand over to Howard, who's going to be taking us through the house rules. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew, and good afternoon to everyone. Very simply, for those of you who have not attended one of our sessions before, we are using Slido throughout. For those of you who've not used it before, it's very simple. Most people use it on their mobile phones. We're going to be using it in 3 ways today. A poll that will hopefully give some information to all of us and will prompt some conversation. So if you'd like to enter, go to slido.com, which is slido.com, and you can use the code #LM with today's date of 19/03/21, or you can scan the code by using the QR that you'll find at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. If you have questions today, please put those into Slido. If you feel you have a question that someone else has asked that you think is really good, you can vote for that, and that'll put the question up the pecking order. And later on, towards the end, we'll also remind you that your feedback on today's session would be greatly appreciated. And Slido will open up around about 10 to the hour, and we'll keep it open until about 1/4 the hour. And your feedback's really appreciated. Please do use the chat pane to let us know who you are, and for people in the room, that will tell us who they are, where they come from, and you may find someone you know. So back now to you, Andrew, and many thanks.
Thank you very much, Howard. So before I introduce Keith, let's put the survey up on the screen so folks can see what we're asking. Just 3 questions, 2 multiple choice and 1 where we need an answer. So first question is, what do you feel the main innovations that will drive the sector transformation? And this is, as I say, you have a choice. And I think you need to number them, don't you guys? 1 to 4, I think it is. So what do you feel the main innovations that will drive sector transformation? And this is multiple choice. So if we move,
if you choose the first one, it'll automatically put them in an order for you.
Yeah,
so,
I realise that. Yeah. Click through. So if you'd like to put the next question up, then Abraham, thank you. What new skills will be required in the future sector? Now, this is for you to give an answer. This is not multiple choice, this one. So you need to put your thinking cap on here and identify what you think is the new skills that will be needed. And then thirdly, another multiple choice. What are the main barriers that need to be overcome? Okay. So Keith's going to come up in a moment. Because we're celebrating comic relief today, I just thought I'd share with you something I heard on the radio this morning. My son is the breakfast show presenter on BBC Radio Leicester, and he had someone come in talking about comic relief, and it was ironic that it was a caller talking about construction, and he said to my son, "Do you want to hear a joke about construction?" And James said, "Well, yes, please." And the guy said, "Well, I'm still working on it." So that's about the best I can do for a bit of a gag leading into comic relief, and hopefully that will give you the incentive just to donate something on the via the comic relief link in the chat box. But let's get back to serious matters. It is a great pleasure for me now to introduce Keith Waller. Keith is probably one of the best known faces in the UK construction industry right now, and a very, very busy man. He's project director of the Construction Innovation Hub, and I'm delighted that he's been able to take time out of his busy diary today to come and give us a bit of an update on innovation, and in particular how innovation is going to drive us through to recovery following the pandemic. So I'm going to mute myself and hand over to you, sir. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I think if we can just allow me to share my screen, I'll put some slides up, and bear with me 1 second. Okay, hopefully you can see my slides now. Yeah, excellent. So I really wanted to talk today around the role of innovation in driving economic recovery. And of course, that's particularly pertinent at the moment where the economy has taken quite a significant hit because of COVID. And we can see already there's an ambition to drive economic recovery with construction at the heart of this. But I'm very keen, and certainly through the work I'm doing, that we are not just trying to deliver a plethora of new, cheap construction projects. We need to try and support sector innovation to try and drive better outcomes from the investment we make in the built environment. So I'm going to talk through a couple of things today, really around the sort of market context we have at the moment, and then link that to the policy environment in which we are going to be operating in the road out of the COVID crisis, and how that may shape innovation, drive innovation, support innovation in the sector. I'm going to talk a little bit around how the market is and could be responding to that investment criteria that come in, the policy criteria that are being set, and talk about how we can try and embed some of that innovation in how we deliver our future construction projects and programs. But perhaps start with a little reminder around where we are at the moment in the sector. And I drew this graph about 3 or 4 years ago when I was in government, looking at productivity growth in the sector over the last 20 years and comparing it to the wider economy and to other sectors of that are contributing significantly to economic growth in the UK. And we can see that whilst overall productivity growth has been relatively flat, I think that's the blue line, we've seen some sectors like manufacturing, like production, that have seen stronger growth in productivity over that same period. But they're bumping along the bottom. Perhaps the worst of a bad bunch is our friend construction. And of course, you can argue that there is a significant productivity opportunity if we can close the gap between how construction has been performing in terms of productivity to how some of the better performing productivity growth areas of the economy have been over the same period. And I think that's a significant opportunity for us as a market, as businesses, and of course that will in turn deliver much benefit to the wider economy, because construction is a huge part of our economy. We employ around 3 million people in the sector in the UK, far larger than aerospace or automotive and many other sectors that are quite well favoured by government. And of course we have a huge number of businesses that operate in the sector, and we have perhaps a lot of opportunity through the investment plans that are coming up to really start shaping the economic recovery, not just from the perspective of the construction sector, but how through what we do in the construction sector, we can drive broader growth across the economy. But of course, it's not just productivity that we have to look at within the sector. We are still very wasteful and a very polluting part of the economy. A huge amount of carbon that we produce as a nation comes from the construction sector, and 62% of all the waste that we send to landfill in the UK comes from construction and demolition activities. So there's an awful lot of opportunity to try and reduce the amount of carbon we produce, both through our construction and how our built environment operates, and reduce the amount of waste that we produce as a sector. There's a huge amount of waste. There is some analysis done that said for every piece of material that's delivered to a construction site in the UK, it is on average moved 4 times around the site before it's put into place, which doesn't strike me as being particularly productive. And for every house we build in England, we send about 5 or 6 tons of waste to landfill. So if you put those two statistics together, that says for every house we build in the UK, we deliver 5 or 6 tons of waste to site. We move it around 4 times, and then we drive it to landfill. That is neither productive, sustainable, or something that we should be particularly proud of. And there's a lot of opportunity for us to reduce the impact we have on the environment. And of course, it isn't just about doing the same thing we've always done, but just doing it properly. And it's not even about doing it a bit better. We really have to look to see if we can do a better thing if we're to address some of these critical challenges we face within the sector and our wider economy as well. We invest a lot, but not by comparison to other sectors, in innovation. But a lot of that is focused around just trying to do it properly or trying to do the same thing a bit better. We've got to try and get that step to start doing a better thing. So if you look at what we have got coming up and where we are sitting as a sector in terms of government's plans and the wider economic plans, there's been very strong signals from government, from Boris, from the Chancellor, that investment in construction and infrastructure is going to be a key element of the economic recovery post-COVID. And we heard Boris talk about build, 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 but the messages around aren't just build cheap, it's build better. It's talking about faster, it's talking about greener, and it's talking about better. Nowhere in that is it but talking about let's just build some stuff and we don't care whether it's any good, just to generate some economic activity. There's a real focus now coming on better, and better means differently from how we've done it in the past. And you can see there's a huge market opportunity. As a nation, we spend around £65 billion every single year just on our economic and social infrastructure. That's new schools, new hospitals, new highways, new rail, new utility projects, new energy projects. £65 billion every single year. And we should be asking ourselves, for that level of investment, not how can we deliver it a bit cheaper? We should be asking how can we deliver it in a way that supports broader social, economic and environmental outcomes from our work in the built environment. And of course, if we look at the policy context, as I said, we are moving and at pace for government, much more paceful than we've seen in recent decades, from thinking not just about what they're going to build, but increasingly how it should be built. And that is, if we go back to the last economic crisis we had just over a decade ago, the financial crisis, the policy response at that time in terms of construction, after the initial wave of projects and programs were cut, when that investment started off again, and perhaps in 2011, the focus was really about how can we deliver it more efficiently? Is how do we do it a bit better? How do we do the same thing a bit better? But now we're seeing a very different environment from government, where we're talking about how do we deliver better value? How do we improve the whole life performance of the construction projects that we are going to deliver? How do we support greater social impact? How do we support our economy in levelling up? How do we drive a faster path to net zero? So it's less focused entirely on the what, and the what used to be just the capital phase of the investment life cycle, to a much more whole life approach, where we're thinking about those broader outcomes that we can deliver. And just a couple of weeks ago, we had the budget. And alongside the budget, the Chancellor published a plan for growth called Build Back Better. And within that, he set out 3 pillars of investment that are going to drive the growth. And these aren't just within the construction sector, these are economy-wide, but they all have significant relevance to us in the construction sector. He was talking about getting more skills, better skills, in an investment in skills that can drive a more productive economy. Talking about investing significant sums in infrastructure to connect our cities, to deliver better services for the citizens of the UK. Huge investment in infrastructure being planned. And he talked about innovation as being a key pillar of the investment that government is going to make. And government is committed to publish a new innovation strategy sometime within the next 6 months. My guess is just before the summer recess. So there's a focus now, rather than on a series of bottom-up tactical interventions that solve today's problems, to taking a long-term and strategic look at some of those key enablers that will drive economic growth and sustainable economic growth. And the construction sector, the infrastructure sector, is at the heart of those plans, which is really quite encouraging for us. And of course, if that's the policy environment, the level of investment that we're seeing now and planned into the future, and we're seeing a policy context that says we are going to start to look at things a bit differently. We're going to start to value different things. So we should be asking ourselves, if there are these long-term plans for investment in our built environment, in construction and infrastructure throughout the UK, and if the policy landscape that's being set out is demanding a different response from the market, talking about how do we embed greater levels of digital working, how do we drive more manufactured solutions, modern methods of construction into our projects and programs, and how do we measure and deliver value through a lens that we want to measure not just through saving money during construction, but delivering better performance, delivering wider ambitions around social impact, around environmental impact. And of course, as I said in one of my earlier slides, as a sector, our productivity growth has been lagging the economy as a whole. And the UK economy has not grown significantly in productivity. So we're worse than the average. And we do invest lower levels of our money in R&D within the construction sector than other sectors. So we have an opportunity then to sort of say, there is a long-term plan now. We have some visibility and certainty of what's happening. How do we take advantage of the fact that the policy landscape is now demanding us to deliver a better response, not to have to compete on how cheap can we build something, but start to compete on how much value we can add as a sector, how we can support some of these broader ambitions we have as a nation. And how do we do that in an environment where we have lower levels of investment in R&D? Most of our sector is not particularly profitable and doesn't have that huge amount of capital to invest and burn in R&D and innovation projects. So there really is both a long-term opportunity, but there are some barriers that we need to address to make sure we can take full advantage of that opportunity. And if I look at it through the lens of the Construction Innovation Hub, we are part of the construction sector deal. We're funded through the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, and we have a 4-year program, which we're just over halfway through now, which is funded to try and drive and support that transformation of the sector. How do we embed greater levels of digital and manufacturing in that space? How do we provide evidence of the value that we can deliver? And how do we support some of those broader ambitions? So if you look at this slide from left to right, if you like, we are being paid as the Construction Innovation Hub to deliver a series of inputs, deliver a series of reports, develop some new tools and so on. But we have to do that working with government and industry. We can't do that in splendid isolation. So we're reaching out, and the CE network is very much one of our key partners in our program. But we're doing those, we're producing those reports, those solutions, those tools, those products, so we can deliver better buildings. And those better buildings that will support improved through life performance, better services for the users of the built environment, better capability to support better operation for the owners, for the operators. And we're looking to produce a better physical product and a digital twin of that at the same time. But that's not enough. You know, it's not just about producing better buildings in a better way. We need to make sure that we're taking full advantage of the opportunities to deliver better outcomes from the investment we make in the built environment. So how can we make sure that through what we're doing and how we're doing it, we are supporting those broader social, economic and environmental outcomes that we want to seek? So, and of course, as a funded programme, we can think that the government has put in £170 million into the construction sector deal. When you think of the size of the construction sector in the UK compared to other sectors like aerospace and automotive, who get significant amount of investment funding from government, as a proportion of the construction sector, £170 million over 4 years is pitifully small. But it is still exactly £170 million more than government has ever put in to a funded investment programme. So it is a start. And if we're able to demonstrate to government through the investment they're making in transforming the sector, if we're doing it in a way that we're producing solutions that clients and government value and want to buy, and we're developing that capability and capacity and unlocking that innovation in the sector to deliver better, then that will start to unlock further funding from government when we've demonstrated through what we're doing now, it's supporting their policy objectives, supporting that transformation agenda and delivering against the ambition of the construction sector deal. And let me just touch on a couple of parts of our programme. One of the areas where perhaps we spend a lot of time engaging with the market and engaging with industry is around moving to modern methods of construction. And we're focusing in the hub very much on manufacturing. We're talking about bringing in proper manufacturing processes in how we deliver the built environment of the future. And we've done some work recently, and you'll see the report up there published a couple of months ago, where we work with government, 5 government departments, housing, education, health, defence and justice, to have a look at their forward investment programme. And we looked at £50 billion worth of projects that they were planning to deliver over the next 5 years, about £10 billion a year of projects, to analyse, is it the sort of market where manufactured solutions can be deployed? Is it something that is actually worth investing in? Can it deliver that more productive, more sustainable industry that we want? And we found that through that process, we looked at all the various spaces that they had in terms of classrooms or hospital wards or living rooms or bedrooms across the whole estate to see if there were any opportunities to start putting in manufacturing and production thinking into that so we can deliver those assets in a better way. And we found from that out of that £50 billion, around 70% or around £35 billion over the next 5 years could be delivered in whole or in part by platform solutions. And I spent about 10 years working in Her Majesty's Treasury. And one of the questions that was always asked there was, if it's such a good idea, why aren't people doing it already? Why isn't it happening? Why isn't the market responded to that? Why should government intervene? And part of the challenge in this sector, and our analysis showed, that actually government is almost preventing that market from coming forward by the way it sets out very bespoke and unique specifications. We looked across that £50 billion. There's 104 different names for toilets in there. So if you're a manufacturer, you can't develop a product that can work everywhere because everyone has a slightly different specification, even though the requirements are exactly the same. So there's a challenge there about getting government to set out its requirements in a way that supports not a artisan bespoke solution, but allows us to bring in proper manufacturing processes. So manufacturing is not about producing a standard product. Manufacturing is about using a standard process. And that's, I think, where there's a difference between platform type construction, where buildings are put together through kits of parts, and perhaps some of the off-site construction, which in many cases, not all, but in many cases is really just normal construction activities using normal construction trades, but taking place in a warehouse away from site. So there's a real opportunity to work with government to try and create and enable a market. And there's a huge amount of synergy in the spaces that sit between education and health and housing and defence and justice, where there's a real opportunity to drive some common approaches to how we deliver those buildings, rather than the unnecessarily bespoke situation we have at the moment. And if you look at the policy environment that government is setting out for what it wants to see from its investment in construction, it's really wanting to see greater levels of modern methods of construction. And if we look at how we spend our money at the moment, today, we spend as a nation through the public sector around about £15 billion every year on buildings, be it schools, be it social housing, be it government offices, be it single living accommodation, around about £15 billion every single year. And today, the vast majority of that is delivered through traditional construction. We do see some refurbishment, we do see some offsite, but actually, as we progress forward, and in line with government's policy ambitions and the work that's going on through things like the CLC, the Construction Leadership Council, and others, we're going to see a big growth in manufactured solutions, where we're going to start to use proper manufacturing processes to deliver those schools and hospitals and social houses in the future. So if you're a business operating now in the sector, if you want to have your entire focus on traditional forms of construction, you will see that perhaps as a declining market. The amount as a proportion that we deliver for the public sector will decrease in terms of traditional solutions and start to increase in terms of manufactured solutions. And of course, we expect to see, as we start to drive a path to net zero, and that with COP26 later this year is going to start to ramp increasingly up the political agenda, we'll see more need for retrofit solutions on the existing estate and how we can repurpose buildings to change use as demand has changed. So we'll expect to see perhaps a different demand for office space in metropolitan areas as people choose to work differently in the response to COVID. How do we repurpose our existing estate in a way that makes them economically and financially viable? So I think the blend of how we will do that £15 billion a year in 10 years' time is very different from how we were going to be doing it today. And it's not a magic switch that will flip overnight, but it is a process over time where increasingly we need to build those technical solutions, build the appetite in government to want to ask for them, and build that capability and capacity in the market to be able to deliver them. And of course, our platform approach really is looking at kits of parts and how they can be used to put our buildings together in the future. And we're bringing in learning from those manufacturing sectors which have digitized manufacturing processes. And of course, as I said earlier, it's about developing some standardized processes, not the products. We want to have that flexibility for buildings to look and feel different, but we can still use a standard process. If we take the aerospace industry as an example, we look at a Boeing 777. Boeing 777s is a standard aeroplane, but they have 3 different types of engine that are used depending on the needs of the airline themselves. There's one made by Rolls-Royce, one made by GE, and one made by Pratt & Whitney. So they can choose 3 different engines. And all of those 3 engines have unique proprietary intellectual property and design within them. But what they do share is a common interface for how that engine connects to the wing. There is a standard interface that's specified that allows the airlines to choose a different product to meet their particular needs. And that defines the physical connection, the interface standard. It defines what data flows across that connection. It defines what fluids flow across that connection. And we can think about, can we deliver some of those similar type approaches where you can interchange components and fit them into a standard chassis, that mass customization we see in the automotive sector. So you could have a different cladding system that fitted onto your structural frame to meet the local needs, the local aesthetic, the needs of the planners, the needs of the developers, the needs of the building owners. At the moment, everything is unique and bespoke, or largely unique and bespoke. We want to try and have standardized interface standards, interface protocols that allow kits of parts to be interchanged. And we're going to do and develop a platform rulebook to enable that market moving forward. The hub, and let me be clear, and I'll say this again later, the Construction Innovation Hub is not and will never be a market player. Our job is to enable the market, to enable businesses like yours to prosper and grow in a new way of working that supports a more productive, innovative, sustainable sector. Our job, using the public money we've been given, is to try and create a way for businesses to thrive and grow. And of course, the platforms, we've got evidence that says it delivers to a higher quality, there's greater levels of safety, there's less waste generated through that construction and erection process, there's less carbon used in production and on site. It gives you greater levels of speed and more predictability. And it does allow that mass customization and the ability to repurpose buildings as demand and need changes. At the moment, there isn't a rule book in place. That's what we're developing at the moment. And there isn't the capacity in the market to be able to deliver those solutions were the technical utopia to be here already. So our job is really to work with government to help build that appetite for these solutions, to work with our industry partners to develop those technical solutions, and to work with the market so they've got the right incentives to invest in the new skills, tools, products and capability to be able to service this new and growing market. And one of the areas that, alongside the manufacturing, that we've been spending quite a lot of time on, and we're working very closely with CE on this, is the Value Toolkit, which is really how do we help people, particularly clients, make better decisions that drive the outcomes they want, that support the delivery of value, not something that just leads to a competitive process where they choose the cheapest bid that comes in. We need to help them make better informed choices that support social impact, net zero, whole life performance, better user experience, and so on and such forth. And we're going to be publishing in about 5 or 6 weeks' time the first of these sort of tools that will enable clients to work with their advisors, to work with the market, to set out what is important to them. And of course, in the public sector, the Department for Education, the Department for Justice, the Ministry of Defence and others, they're all working under exactly the same policy environment. They still share the common ambition for social value, that's government policy. They share the ambition for driving a path to net zero and so on and such forth. But at the moment, the way they articulate their requirements to the market is very different. So if you're an industry supplier, if you're a business operating in the construction sector, it's very difficult for you to develop an investment case because every project is unique. All you are able to do really under the way the market operates much of the time at the moment is to invest tactically for each project rather than strategically for the whole market. So this value profile that we expect to see increasingly used by government and clients in the future, we expect that to be quite consistent in terms of that shape and that profile between different government departments and different agencies, because they're working under the same drivers. Obviously, there'll be some local differences between sectors and between regions, but broadly the shape should be the same, because broadly the policy is the same. And then if you're seeing a consistent way of asking for value from clients, that gives you a greater incentive when you combine that with a long-term pipeline to say, actually, here's something where I think I can develop something that differentiates me, that enables me to gain a more profitable market share from this long-term and sustainable market. So when we talk about innovation, and again, going back to the very crude thing, is there's three types. It's either do the same thing properly, do the same thing better, or do a better thing. We're very much focusing on the last of those through our program. But so what we're trying to do through our program really is to identify and develop solutions that actually make a difference. So things around the platform rulebook, things around the golden thread, the digital golden thread we were doing with the Centre for Digital Will Britain, stuff around the Value Toolkit, where speaking with clients, speaking with government, speaking with policymakers, they're saying these are the sort of things we want from our investment in the built environment. So what are the things they're looking for? Can we help develop some tools or solutions that help them meet that need? And again, being clear, we are not a market player. Our job is a market enabler. But just developing the technical solutions by themselves doesn't achieve anything. What you need to do is find a way to build appetite in clients so they want to buy these type of solutions because they can see how it meets their value drivers. They see how it helps them align with that policy environment, the environment either from government or in private sector that comes from investors in that space. So we have to not just develop a technical solution that meets a need, we have to make sure we're shaping the policy and regulatory and standards environment in a way that clients see the real value in adopting a different approach rather than reverting to type and doing what they've done for the last 150 years. And thirdly, of course, if we've got a technical solution and clients want to buy it, then we need to help the market, enable the market to thrive and grow, develop that capability and capacity so they can service that need. So we have to work through our program, not just on the technology, the shiny new things. We have to work very closely with government and policymakers to make sure the environment is there that allows those innovations, those technical solutions to come forward. And we need to work with the market as well, so they have the right incentives to invest in developing that capability and capacity to service it. And, perhaps for the third or fourth time, we have an advantage of being publicly funded. So we have our 70 odd million pounds over the years to do that. So we don't have any vested interest in making money for ourselves. The opposite. Our job is to try and deliver better value for the citizens of the UK because we're managing public money. Our job is to try and make sure what we're putting forward and developing aligns with the policy ambitions of government and private sector clients. And then crucially, our job is to enable private sector businesses, consultants, contractors, product suppliers to be able to thrive and develop a capacity and capability to service this. We can do that as a funded market enabler in a way that you can't do as a private sector business where you're trying to take a market position yourself. So if this is my last slide, what we're seeing at the moment is a clear appetite and a driver for the sector to innovate. It's coming from government. We're seeing that through the policies that they're putting out, the construction playbook, the ambitions that are set out in the plan for growth. We're seeing that from clients who want greater certainty on their investment. And we're crucially seeing it from businesses as well. One of the things that COVID has delivered as an unexpected side benefit, if you like, is it's brought together the industry in a way that I've not seen over the last 30 or 40 years. So the Construction Leadership Council has really risen to the challenge and actually become quite powerful and effective, not just at convening the industry and helping it to restart and get sites back working safely when they were shut down just under a year ago, but also for creating a much stronger and joined up voice with government. This is the first time that government has really listened to the construction sector. It seeks out the construction sector's advice now. And the construction playbook, when it was published in December last year, was published and developed in collaboration with industry. So there was a lot of people involved in helping to shape and write that so it would land well with industry. So this is a policy being done with industry, not to industry. And so the sector is now very much consulted with and engaged with and understood by government in a way it perhaps hasn't been in recent years. But of course, with all of this, and I say this a lot, working out what to do is the easy part. Yeah, how to make it happen is where the real skill comes in. And we really got to try and do this as a collective. This cannot be driven project by project, bottom up. We need to start thinking strategically around how we engage as an industry, how we look to the long term, how we invest not tactically for each project, but strategically for the market. And of course, if we are to get innovation embedded and making a difference on that transformation, we need those three elements to come together. That technical solution that delivers and meets a market need and supports those better outcomes, those better social, economic and environmental outcomes. We need to shape that policy environment at the same time, that regulatory environment, that standards environment that gives confidence and evidence to clients and government that it's the right thing for them to do and it's a good thing that will meet their objectives. And of course, we have to work with industry to make sure we build that capability and capacity that enables the market to grow and thrive and become more sustainable, more innovative and more profitable. So I can leave that there, Andrew, and then I'll stop sharing and very happy to take questions.
Keith, thank you so much. For somebody that's been involved in the UK construction industry change agenda since the mid-90s, what I've just heard from you fills me with great expectation and hope. I'd like to pick up on one or two of the points before we go into the survey. Certainly, I agree with you that the work of the CLC and the way that the construction industry's come together during the pandemic, I think has put us in a very good position. It actually shows that we can collaborate, we can integrate, and we can deliver. But of course, with that now comes responsibility because we're going to be expected to do it again. I think you've outlined very, very clearly that for the first time, again, in my working memory, first time the government has actually invested in us in the way they have. So I think we should be thankful for that and thankful to you and what your team are delivering. But I couldn't agree more. I've been involved in change agenda since Latham and Egan. It's all about the how, because we've known the why and the what for quite a while. To be honest, I think it's now about the how. Before we go into some questions, and we do have a few for you, Keith, I wonder, Abraham, could we have the survey results up on the screen and let's see what Keith has to say about this. So what do you feel the main innovations that will drive the transformation? Let's see what the answers were. So net zero at the top, digital data manufacturing. What have you got to say about that batting order, Keith?
Well, I think you're right. All of those are going to play a part. And again, with all of these things, it isn't one thing in splendid isolation. A lot of these things link together. So, you know, one of the drivers might be the ambition for net zero. But perhaps numbers 2, 3, and 4 are things that need to be there to support it. And of course, when we think about our industry as a whole, it's probably fair to say that the people who work in our industry don't really reflect the society we serve. So I mean, when I joined the construction sector, probably 35 years ago, when I graduated 35 years ago, I didn't care or even think about what was the effect on the environment from the work we were doing. My decision making at that time was who's going to pay me more and who's going to give me a company car. I was quite shallow, and hopefully I've sort of slightly evolved since then. But if you
not just you, Keith, not just you, I can assure you.
If you look at the graduates are wanting to enter the job market at the moment, they're much more socially and environmentally aware. They do care about, are you going to be a polluter? Do you behave ethically? What's your view on social impact, and so on? So we can do a lot in terms of how we deliver our projects and how we communicate with the public to make our industry much more attractive. It's not about trying to persuade a broader range of people to do unattractive jobs. It's trying to create some attractive careers that attract the best talent in the industry. So I think all of those are important, and they will have a balance how they'll impact.
Of course, and the word that actually comes to mind with our G4C group within CE, the Generation for Change, 35 and unders, is the word purpose. And it is exactly the change that you indicate. You know, when I came into the industry, it was all about how much I was going to get paid, company car, expenses account, everything else, perks. Now it is far more about the purpose and the value they're going to bring to society, which is good. Let's have the next question up, can we? And the answers that came from this question. So what new skills will be required in the future sector? Well, digital's there, knowledge transfer, multi-skilled managers, and just scroll down if you would, Abraham. Just wondered if you've got any comments on that, Keith. Probably all of the above, I would suggest.
I think all of the above, but many of them are not traditional construction careers. So there is a question about, you know, what are our universities and higher education institutions pumping out? Are they the right skills we need for the future? And what appears through a lot of those is perhaps, you know, less of a reliance on single discipline traditional skills, not just in the professions, but in the trades as well. So, you know, we might have a lot of bricklayers and plasterers and glaziers at the moment in the sector, but we might have trained assemblers, logistics technicians, and different types of skills, and people doing more than one or two things rather than stuck in their traditional biblical trades or their traditional professions. So I think that flexibility, that agility, and that ability to do more than one thing, it's not just those traditional disciplines, that I think will be as prevalent tomorrow as they are today.
What's interesting for me, looking at some of the answers, there's a lot dealing with digital and IT skills and so on, but 3 or 4 have mentioned collaborative working, which is quite interesting because our webinar next Friday is all about collaborative working. We did one of these webinars just before Christmas on the roadmap to recovery, and we asked a group of clients in the room, what do you think is going to hold us back in terms of achieving the roadmap to recovery? And the answer came back, the industry knows the word collaboration, but doesn't know the behaviors required to deliver it, which got some of us thinking in CE who've been around a while, because about 10 years ago, there was a diploma in collaborative working. So we got it down off the shelf, dusted it off, and we've updated it. And we're going to be launching that in the autumn. So next week, we're going to have a session on collaborative working, because certainly my experience is that it's those behaviors that have been missing. We've had all the correct intent, but actually people talk about these issues, then go back to their offices, places of work, and revert to type and do what they've always done.
Andrew, I think that there's probably a couple of lenses that it's worth thinking about with collaboration, because quite often when people talk about collaboration, they're often talking about a collaboration between a client and a main contractor on a construction project. So some of that collaboration is often around between, you know, two parties on how something is going to be done. What I think we're seeing now, certainly with governments and major clients, is a recognition of the benefits of getting the market, the supply chain involved much earlier in the process. So the collaboration isn't just about what, it's a collaboration about how, it's a collaboration about what. And if you look at other sectors, the SMEs, the innovators, are involved much earlier in the process than they are in the construction sector. So I think we'll see a different sort of collaboration with a broader set of people happening earlier in the investment lifecycle. So to be able to deliver those collaborative skills, you know, we need to make sure we're thinking not just about the capital phase, but that whole life and that early stage, and when we're making decisions, not on how, but on what.
And that's clear, isn't it, in the construction playbook, and to a degree the value toolkit. But I couldn't agree with you more, Keith. I mean, I go back to the 6 principles of collaborative working, which I started to work with Zara Lamont back in, you know, the year 2000, around then. And the first 2 were early involvement of the supply chain and procurement on best value, not lowest price. And I don't think that's changed, if I'm honest. Let's go to the next set of answers, shall we? Let's see what's come up next. What are the main barriers you need to overcome? So all of the above, but skills is top, procurement, lack of finance, competition. Anything to say on that, Keith?
That is probably the order I'd have put them in at the moment. I think some of those traditional barriers around procurement are going away. The policy is very clear now. It will take a while for it to filter through to everything. But now that previous thing about I don't care where you are from. I don't care what happens after you finish construction. How cheap can I buy the capital phase? That is disappearing. Certainly in mature clients, that's certainly the policy at the moment. But at the moment, if we look at our market, the 3 million people who work in the industry, we don't have, at the moment, the right blend of skills to deliver a manufactured, highly productive, sustainable solution. And we don't need it overnight, but we do need to have a clear plan of how we're going to transition from what we have in the marketplace now with some very skilled people. And it isn't a case of just booting them all out and finding some new people. We have to bring in the right people in the industry. We have to retrain and upskill and reskill the people who work in the sector to be able to work in that way. So a really sort of powerful long-term plan for getting the right skills in to industry, at professional and trade level is really important. I do think the finance issue is something that could hold us back a little bit. At the moment, we need to perhaps engage a little bit more with the city. If you are wanting to buy a manufactured home and you go and apply for a mortgage, question 1 on the 1973 spreadsheet they use is the house traditionally built out bricks and mortar? If the answer is no, then they reject you. Despite the fact that actually the manufactured solution could be significantly better and a safer investment in that space, and equally making sure you can get insurance products on there. It's a barrier that needs to be overcome, but I think it's probably, and it is an important barrier, but I would put it perhaps 3rd on that list. But it's not one we can ignore because it's not in the top 2.
No, absolutely. And I'm encountering that on a day-to-day basis. Insurance and funding, 2 big issues at the moment. I'm going to move on to some questions in a moment, Keith. Just before I do so, can I remind everyone listening in, if you go to the chat box, there's a link that takes you through to Comic Relief, because we are trying to raise some funds for Comic Relief, it being Red Nose Day. So please do give generously. And also, I've now put a link in the chat box which will allow you to gain a CPD certificate for today. There's a link, there's a code, and you can download your own CPD certificate for the last 60 minutes. So let's go to some questions. Before I go to the Slido, Keith, there's one in the chat box from Thomas Neeson, who says, why so little percentage of refurb?
Okay, so on that graph that I showed, that was based on the government's investment plans, their new capital projects investment plans. What will happen, and you'll see that there will be a significant program of retrofit of the existing site. That wasn't within the analysis that we looked at. So that was on their school building and their hospital building program. So there is a proportion in there, but it's not huge at the moment. When we start looking at some of the the residential market, the homes retrofit, that will start to become increasingly significant. And there are a couple of challenges there at the moment, because where government is managing a £600 billion pipeline and can start to shape a policy and regulatory environment that enables the new capital projects to be delivered in line with a consistent policy, the retrofit market, particularly domestically, is single households making individual investment decisions. So at the moment, it's over-reliance on traditional trades. So actually, the significant amount of diesel used in white vans is almost counterproductive. It's not a strong investment case on a bottom-up, household-by-household basis. So I would expect to see a national retrofit strategy. CLC have started on that in the last week or so. To sort of start to think about those broader ways you can incentivize and drive the market. Because Thomas, you're absolutely right. We're not going to achieve net zero if we're not addressing retrofit, and we're not going to address retrofit bottom up, household by household. We need to have a much more strategic plan than sits around at the moment.
Thank you, Keith. Abraham, could we now go to the questions? Before I do that, just a comment from Claire Jones, who's agreed with you, Keith. She said, very difficult to get insurance at the moment on my SIPS self-build. Right, let's take these one at a time, Abraham, shall we? Let's go to the first question. The sector is historically reluctant to change and innovate. How can we engage leaders who are more interested in managing today rather than leading for tomorrow? There's an interesting one.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I think actually, to me, that's slightly less true today than it was a couple of years ago. So what we've got now is we have a funded program, we have a construction leadership council, and crucially, we have a policy environment where it's being asked for. One of the things the construction sector has always been extremely good at is being agile in responding to what a client asks for. So if a client asks for, I don't care anything about carbon, how cheap can you build it? We've responded well to that. But actually now government's starting to say, I'm expecting, if I'm going to place a contract with you, for you to be able to demonstrate how you're delivering against these broader policy ambitions. I'm expecting you not to be able to do that by what you've done in the past. So I think there's the way clients can drive the industry behavior, and industry actually wants to respond. I thought it would be much harder in the Construction Innovation Hub to get industry along with us, because it is something new and it's a bit more tomorrow than today. But the Value Toolkit, we've got over 200 businesses working with us. On our platform program, we've got 40 or 50 of the major suppliers, the Macy's, the Kias, the Skanskas, the Vaughanses, the Mott McDonald's, the Zahir Hadid's. Those are the organisations working with us on the platform program, because they recognise that the market we have today is not going to be fit for purpose in the future, because they can see what's coming in terms of what investors are demanding, in terms of what government is demanding, in terms of what society is demanding. So I think there's more of an appetite to change now. Now, quite frankly, let's be clear. We have to manage the transition between today and tomorrow. You can't suddenly just throw everything away that you've got today. But if we can get people to line up to a common vision of where we need to get to, and give them some flexibility on the path of how we navigate from today to that utopian future, what we found so far is there are virtually all of the major businesses wanting to come on that journey and realizing the benefits of that. And again, we're in a slightly advantageous position because we are a market enabler, not a market player. So, everyone can benefit from what we do, irrespective of who's put the money in, because it's government's money.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. For what I've seen in the last 12 months gives me tremendous hope. I think the construction industry is coming together with a common goal, common themes. Certainly the build back faster, off-site, better quality and greener net zero seem to be topics that the whole industry has grasped and is working together. I've just got a comment here, Keith, before I go to the next question. If you could get the next question ready for me, Abraham. But George Abraham is saying, I'm now consulting in India in the renewable energy space. There's a huge opportunity for UK industry and companies to come together to collaborate and grow global trade. So there's some interesting information. Now then, sectors usually change by market force or by a disruptor, e.g. Amazon in retail. Where do you see the disruption coming, Keith, from that will change the sector?
Yeah, again, a really good question. And quite frankly, the answer might be Amazon, by the way. So at the moment, if you look historically over these various lists that are published of the top 20 contractors or top 50 consultants in the UK, year by year, there's generally not a huge amount of change. People move up the rankings, down the rankings. Every now and again, people merge. Someone buys someone else out. Every now and again, rarely someone goes pop like a Carillion or a Jarvis. But broadly, it's the same sort of names. What I think is going to drive the change is when people recognise the power of data and how that can be used to drive better performance. As we start to think about the whole investment life cycle rather than just the capital phase, we're already seeing organisations like Google and Amazon starting to sniff around. So I think if we step forward a few years, that top 20 list will still contain many of the names we know already, but I think there'll be some new people in there. And I think they're going to come from not traditional construction backgrounds, people who have a data, who can monetize the data or add value to the data. It may come from other sectors where we're starting to deliver things in a very different way. But I think data will drive that disruption. And those businesses that are able to be agile and adapt are likely to continue to thrive. Those who are rooted firmly in 1973 may not be on that list for much longer.
Good point. I seem to remember 20 years ago, Toyota was the biggest house builder in Japan. But anyway, we've got some more questions. They're going to need to be quick answers, Keith, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So the next one, as a sector, How do we compare in innovation with other developed economies, not just Europe, but worldwide?
I think there are, if you go across the world, there are elements that that most nations or a number of nations will do better than us. I think we've got the best joined up program at the moment. So there's certain economies that are very good on manufacturing, but they're quite poor on digital. We sort of have a leading edge in digital and the BIM technology, and the opportunity to try and grow that in terms of a joined up program. There's no one else quite on the scale of the UK looking at those broad range of issues. And we do have a supportive policy environment.
Certainly what I see, sorry, Keith, I interrupted you. I beg your pardon.
I was going to say we're probably mid-table on the individual items on many of them, but right. Collectively we're quite near the top.
And I was just going to mention that CE actually is spreading the word around the globe as well. We've got people like Don Ward now doing some international work. One more question. Who, in your view, has the biggest appetite to innovate? Government, clients, or business?
I want to say it's none of them. I think it's investors.
Okay.
So I think we'll see investors driving quite a lot of the change in there. I think all of them are having some appetite. The advantage we have at the moment is the appetite of government, clients, and businesses is actually aligned rather than pointing in different directions, which is quite encouraging. But I'm seeing quite a lot of private sector investments, infrastructure funds, who are starting to demand different things. They're looking at their ESGs. They're looking at their corporate social responsibility. And they're saying, I'm only going to invest in things, businesses and projects that are supporting those longer term sustainable goals that I have. So there's government is actually quite ambitious. I never thought I'd say that. It really is quite ambitious and almost joined up. And businesses, I think, now are aligned with government and clients in general. So I'm like you, Andrew, I'm really quite positive that the ducks are in a row at the moment.
Keith, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Ladies and gents, would you kindly go to slido.com, #LM190321 before you leave, just to give us your exit survey. We find that most useful. What I'm going to do now is just ask you one more time, if you haven't yet donated to Comic Relief Red Nose Day, please do so on the link I gave you. If you don't do it now, please do it later. I'm going to thank my colleagues at Leaders Meets, to Howard and Abraham, as always, for hosting. And the biggest thank you to you, Keith, for giving up an hour of your valuable time to come and talk about innovation. As I said earlier, what you're doing is inspirational. And on behalf of the whole industry, I thank you and your team for what I'm sure will be very, very valuable work. Next Friday, ladies and gents, we're going to be talking about collaborative working. And I'm going to be joined, actually, I'm going to be speaking for a change. I'm going to be joined by several of my colleagues and others. And we're going to be telling you about a diploma in collaborative working that we'll be launching in the autumn. But for now, it's time to say good afternoon and have a lovely weekend. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.